Okay, so I just would like to make a quick introduction, and I'd like to thank Fawzy and Rajesh for joining us today. And so, as you see the title here, Fawzy is Senior Manager at Deloitte, and Rajesh is Senior Consultant at Deloitte, and they are going to give us presentation today and technical talk on software delivery optimization. I'd like to welcome both of you. I wish that we are able to welcome you here at Manhattan College. I believe maybe like we can invite you and see you in person here and welcome you here. So Fawzy and Rajesh, I'm going to give you the floor and you can go ahead.
Thanks, everybody, and good evening. Thank you, Dr. Rifai, for inviting me and Rajesh to speak to this wonderful community of yours for both IEEE, the Honor Society, and Manhattan College. I guess maybe we're due for some quick introductions, and then we'll start right into the topic. At any given point in the presentation, it goes without saying, if you'd like to put anything in the chat, the questions, we'll monitor it. We'll try to address it as we go along. If not, we'll have a bit of a Q&A towards the tail end of the presentation as well. So we get a little bit of an audience engagement. Would love to see what's on your mind, if this resonated with you, if you had any feedback towards the end as well. Would love to hear that on top of any questions that you may have to. I'll start with a quick intro, and then I'll hand it over to my colleague Rajesh to introduce himself as well. So who am I? So my name is Fawzy Manna. Like Dr. Fai mentioned, I am part of the cloud engineering team at Deloitte. I'm a technical lead there. My role is senior manager, but most of my work is technical leadership, kind of in nature oriented. And some of the projects I end up working on, it's all client facing. Some of the projects I end up working on are more delivery enablement oriented. So the kind of projects where a large business would like to embark on a business transformation, and they'd like to do that transformation as efficiently as possible, or with as much optimization, quality, and speed as possible. So that's one way kind of engage with clients. Another way is sort of across the board, where a client comes in and say, we want to transform how we work as an organization, and we want to transform the delivery DNA that we have as a company. But that's another kind of projects, another kind of client persona, if you will, that I end up engaging on with my team at Deloitte. Strong believer in failing fast and continuous experimentation. Sometimes you just got to take risk in life and fail as quickly as possible, because that's the only way for you to really learn and become really better at what you do. So, you try and experiment with things, try things out. And, there's a lot of tools and mechanisms available at our disposal these days to be able to do that. The risk of experimentation is much lower than it used to be, which is great for us. And lastly, I do a lot of stuff outside of work, where I try to stay close to the kind of technical community related to everything on DevOps and cloud. I do a lot of community talks, and I'm in the process of writing a book on cloud engineering as well for academia. Some of the photos that you see below there with me and my colleagues at conferences. On the right side, I'm wearing that's in the context of a project where I have the hard hat on, because we're constantly firefighting in IT operations and addressing issues that come up in the context of projects, and which will be something that we'll address on a little bit more, Rajesh and I, today. Rajesh, over to you.
Thanks, Fawzy. Thanks, everyone. I'll also take this opportunity to thank each of you for taking the time and for inviting us to share our experience. Myself, Rajesh Chopra. I'm a senior consultant with the Deloitte's core business operations team, a part of cloud engineering, along with Fawzy. I'm relatively new to Deloitte and consulting side of things. Prior to Deloitte, I have a lot of experience from the industry. I started my career in this in the telecom space, got opportunity to learn more about networking and data communication. Just prior to Deloitte, I got the chance to get my hands dirty with Hadoop and big data. And recently, having joined Deloitte and being part of the cloud engineering team, I got to learn more about the Google Cloud and Azure Cloud, and got my certification in the professional cloud architect. In terms of the kind of engagements that I have had the opportunity to work on at Deloitte, it's been spread across the spectrum itself. Like, I have been involved in doing technology assessment for one of our clients, and that too not in the IT space, but rather in the mining space. And other than technology assessment, I have been involved in business strategy or implementation and delivery type of engagements, and that's where I enjoy most working in, considering my breadth of experience related to the telecom data communication space and experience with the cloud infra. So, and that's basically where my strength lies in. Other than the professional side of things, I am also a project leader at Deloitte's Impact Everyday initiative. This is basically where Deloitte encourages the employees to volunteer their time, their skills to go out and contribute to the community and help the organizations in any which way possible. And personally also, I feel driven to give back to the community. And even this week, I'll be going back to the organization that I worked with last year as part of the Impact Day. And that's one of the pictures that's on the right that you are seeing, where we helped with the Times Change Women Employment Services. And we had them with the interview and resume building process as part of the Impact Day initiative. I consider myself as a lifelong learner, and being part of the consulting space, I feel I'm in the right industry, right organization, because every day or every engagement is completely new. So there's no limitation to learning when it comes to when you are part of Deloitte or the engagements that we do on day-to-day basis at Deloitte. So thanks again for having me and Fawzy, and looking forward to this session.
Thank you, Rajesh, for that introduction. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm sold, Rajesh. I'm sold. That's it. If I wasn't on the team, I'll be coming to join the team soon. But today, what we're here to talk about, Rajesh and I, is an engineering problem, or you know, for a lot of the engineers in the room, in the virtual room here, it's an optimization problem, is what it is. Before we talk about what we're optimizing for, maybe we can take a step back and talk about what are some of those challenges that exist today that gave rise to the concept that we know today as DevOps. So the question that we oftentimes ask, what is wrong with how companies do software delivery? And that's a hard question to ask for multiple, or to answer rather, for multiple reasons. Reason being, not all companies are the same. And you know, secondly, from the outside world, seemingly delivery is fine. You know, companies are delivering, they're making money, you know, everybody's happy. You get your new iPhone, you know, every year on time. So what's wrong? So the answer is multidimensional. So the answer is there is a delivery culture these days associated with how startups work. And what happens oftentimes is, as startups grow, develop, and they become more mature, they add more people. And as they add more people, they add more complexity to their system in parallel as well. And as they do that, they oftentimes have a complex landscape to deal with, right? So on the people side, on the process side, on the system side, and so on, that they have to navigate. And some companies are able to cope with that growth, and other companies are not. And you oftentimes see it manifested in many traditional companies that have been around for a while, just because, you know, the pace of change in the last 10 years especially has been massive. And for a company that existed 100 years ago, that's really hard to do. For some of the companies that sort of digital first cloud first, they were born in this age, that transformation has been a lot easier to cope with because they were born as part of a new kind of culture. So those are some of the things, some of the challenges that we're going to elaborate on a bit more deeply. But those are some of the complexities that you're gonna find for what's wrong with software delivery. You know, there's elements across speed, quality, people satisfaction, quality of life. You hear all those articles on the web about how a company is amazing at delivering software services, products and services. Yet on the other hand, you know, employee satisfaction and morale is really low, and that's translating into ultimately the quality of service that they're able to provide. So
I prepare for my interview tomorrow.
So in particular, some of the key challenges that we see in rampant in industry are waste, siloed work, and technical debt, to name a few. There's more than, the list is broader than this, but those are some of the key challenges where you see a lot of the big financial companies, government, a lot of the companies that existed pre the modern age, right? Over 10 years old, 20 years old, 30-year-old companies. Rajesh and I worked with some companies that were around 100 years ago. And that's a long time to be around and not experience any of those challenges. So let's dive deeper into some of those challenges to explore into them a little bit more. So the first one is waste. So for those of you that are familiar with how traditionally kind of a manufacturing environment kind of used to work, or even an assembly line, right? If you're a car plant and you're making a car, you know, there was very clear definitions of waste that people were knew and were very familiar with, and that waste included things, but not but not limited to over processing and over production, for example. So one workstation is over producing something, the other one doesn't have the ability to consume that much work, so there's a lot of raw material sitting around waiting for processing. That's a form of waste, right? Another form of waste, for example, is if you translate that to the software world or to the IT world, that could be in the form of developers are writing code, and nobody's testing that code in time, right? So that's a one-to-one comparison or parallel to what it was like in the assembly line context, but what it's like now. So what that results in is a lack of ability for organizations to deliver a product end-to-end in a streamlined fashion. Because writing code is one thing, configuring the underlying infrastructure is another, testing that code is the third element, having the right test data to be able to do testing in an objective fashion is a fourth element. Your ability to maybe do testing for there's a functional testing, there's non-functional testing, right? You know, functional testing is against requirements, non-functional testing is against things like quality of code and the meeting of certain quality standards around performance and so on. And if the process is not streamlined enough, you could have over processing happening at each one of those stages, leading to the company not being able to release something every day or every week or every month. And thus you have these ballooning release timelines. All of a sudden, some companies can only release once every quarter or once a year, a new increment of their product, which becomes dangerous in today's world where a startup can come up anytime and create a digital bank, right? And can release product increments on that digital bank, which is just basically an app that you have on your smartphone. Release those increments on a weekly basis, you know, so that company's ability to be competitive is that much better now than that bank that can only release on quarterly basis or your yearly basis and so on. And this is a real danger that companies and company executives talk about constantly now. There's constant fear about where's the next startup coming from, and is that next startup going to eat my lunch just because of their ability to compete and release products and services fast with a higher level of quality and provide a better customer satisfaction. What are other form of waste out there? So sometimes there is, for example, extra requirements. A lot of the larger organizations are very ambitious, right? To their own detriment. So what they'll say is, we have these 2,000 requirements that we need to write. And in reality, maybe they don't need all 2,000. Maybe they need 200 of them to be able to really meet what we call a minimum viable product and be able to succeed with 80% of their business case. And then, the delta, which is, if my math is right, 1,800 features are going to meet only 20% of their business case. That is a form of waste as well. Your ability and a company's ability to prioritize what's truly important for their customers and focus on that and forget about all the other noise is another form of waste. Context switching for developers and testers is another form of waste. A lot of companies, just because of their sheer size, people wear multiple hats, right? And their ability to sort of say, listen, you have one task or two tasks, or you have a focus area or a focus domain, and it is not there. And because of that context switching consumes a lot of time and effort in the thousands of hours, on the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars if you aggregate it over a span of a year. It doesn't initially look that way, but it is that way when you aggregate it. What about the next element, siloed work? So a lot of these large organizations, because a lot of it is human nature to just go and say, well, we have 10,000 people in this company. And when that happens, what you tend to want to do naturally is say, oh, let's divide them into teams. So how most organizations end up dividing people into teams is do it by function and say, okay, you're the business team, you're the dev team, you're the testing team, you're the other kind of testing team, you're the infrastructure team, you're the operations team, but you're the team that does that kind of operation that's going to take us to production, you're the release team, and so on. So all of a sudden, along what we call a value chain, which is all the steps that it takes to release one feature, just one feature, from development to production, there's like 9-10 silos or steps or milestones that require handoffs between separate teams in order for you to release even a single feature, which contributes to what I talked about earlier about why companies' abilities are hampered to be able to release anything fast. A lot of the larger corporations be able to release anything fast these days. Those silos are a real struggle for them. And there's ways to address that in terms of how they can reorganize themselves to be more nimble. So there's, for those of you that are familiar, there's a concept of product teams that are multidisciplinary and self-sufficient, where you have one tester, one developer, one operator, one release specialist in the same body of work or in the same unit. And that allows you to have less silos and less tossing over the wall of developer going to tester saying, here's a new change. Tester saying, no, that's bad. Go back to the drawing board. Okay, new change. No, that's bad. Defect, change, defect, change, defect. And you get stuck in these over the wall tossing of tickets that's really endless, right? Sometimes, and then people review their processes and they're like, what are we really doing? Like, why is this stuck for months, this work items that we're unable to release to production? And when you analyze it, it's just two human beings in two separate teams, not really aligned on a common objective, which is we care for this product that we want to release out the door. So that's a little bit about siloed work. The last element is about technical debt. And technical debt is basically a form of debt. And that's technology-based. If you don't pay it, you incur more interest. And if you incur more interest, you're going to pay more later. So the more of it that you address now, the better it is your ability in the future at focusing more on new innovations versus paying off debt. It's like government, right? A lot of people will say, well, government is spending too much. And what they mean by that is, well, you're racking national debt. And when you rack national debt, your ability in the next budget decreases because you're paying more debt, right? So it's kind of like that. It's the same concept, right? By the way, I didn't mean to take a political stance. I'm just giving an example, rather. So what you see in this visual in front of you is a really beautiful set of infrastructure, digital infrastructure. A lot of companies come and say, digital 3.0, and there's a bunch of beautiful portals, websites, mobile apps, a layer for AI, microservices to serve business functionality. And then at the bottom, there's this one system, like that red circle at the bottom. It's just holding everything. And if it crumbles, the entire organization crumbles. We've seen, Rajesh and I have seen this times and times again in various organizations, where that one item of technical debt, because everybody's neglecting it, it hampers the entire company's ability to be able to do changes. So that's something that we also kind of look at oftentimes when we engage with larger organizations that are struggling with the optimization of their software delivery. So this is how DevOps became a thing. That's one reason DevOps became a thing, because of all those challenges that I just mentioned, right? So there's some real concrete challenges. Most of them are process related and culture related, as I mentioned earlier, but some of them are technology based as well. I'm going to share with you a different view here, which is a people-based reality, which also contributed to the rise of what we call today DevOps. And that is just pure tension at work between development teams and an operations team, and frustrated people at work. In fact, most of you are probably familiar with Agile and what Agile is, right? So really what it is in a nutshell, a more streamlined way to do software delivery in a more iterative fashion as well. And a lot of the people sitting in operations who specialize in architecture, security, networking, database administration were forgotten, or looked like they were forgotten because Agile wasn't necessarily implemented correctly in these organizations. And what happened is that gave rise to frustration with those individuals about what Agile did or didn't achieve for them. So while the developers and business people were happy because they were talking better because of Agile, a lot of these operators were kind of like, Agile, meh, it's making my life worse actually as an operator, because I'm getting hit in the face that many times more frequently now, and I have to deal with the same problems I had to deal with, but at a more rapid pace. So the operators didn't like it. And in fact, there's examples of this where this really came together at conferences around the world, but especially one that happened in Europe in the late 2000, when literally there was an Agile conference, and two operators came together and talked about the concept of Agile operations and Agile infrastructure. Literally that was a topic, because they just wanted to say, how can we do Agile? How can we be Agile, small a Agile, doesn't have to be like framework-based stuff, in the context of how we operate infrastructure, how we look after security, how we do networking changes, how we do database changes, all the other aspects of IT that are not code development based. And then later, the same two people that got together coined the name DevOps on Twitter. And it just stood for DevOps, and bringing dev and ops together, because they want to be part of the agility circle. They want to be part of the fold, basically, of enablement. And so it's funny how that came about, but literally that was the story for how the term got coined by two people, and it just became a thing. It flew off from there, and it obviously matured since then, but there were other problems that came with it, and I'll tell you about some of those in just a second. So how did it evolve? So there were a number of pillars that were established in literature for any organization to be called ready for DevOps. And those pillars are the ones that you see in front of you. There's 5 of them. The first is culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. There's multiple versions of this acronym. On the web, you'll see CALM, you'll see CAMS, you'll see columns, which is the more comprehensive version I picked for the purpose of this presentation. But you'll see variations of this in the literature, but it became really widely adopted as a foundation for a company to get to that mode of working as far as software delivery is concerned. So the first one is culture, and it's about how people interact on a daily basis. It's about work behaviors, right? It's about when I finish a work package, how do I hand it off to Rajesh, or better yet, not hand it off at all, because we already worked it together as we went along, right? So that's a little bit of the cultural aspect, and a lot of that is related to organizational structures, related to openness to change, related to is the organization and the people in it open for feedback, and that includes the leaders of that organization as well. The second part is automation, and that's the obvious one, because I think whenever as you'll see in a second, whenever there's any problem, human tendency is just, if I ask anybody, any consultant in the world, and say, hey, we need help, can you provide some recommendations? First thing will say, why don't you just go automate more? So I think that's a big part of the fold for DevOps as well. There's more automation to be done, and there's a lot of practices that came with that automation as well. So it's not just automation for the sake of automation, but there is automation capabilities and practices available in the market about how do you automate the standing up of infrastructure, whether in the cloud or off the cloud. How do you automate testing so you don't need somebody to click a mouse manually? How do you automate the creation of a build package? How do you automate security analysis or penetration testing at the infrastructure level and simulate things like external threats to your systems coming through the network? How do you automate even things like, for some of you that have heard of what a company like Netflix is doing, and the practice of chaos engineering, what they call. So I have this thing called chaos, and Amazon does this as well, Chaos Monkey. And this Chaos Monkey is a software basically that comes in and just jams your like infrastructure and just breaks. It's like the equivalent of going to the data center and breaking the cord, or pulling the cord and seeing what happens, right? And those kinds of practices can be automated, and the purpose of which is to ensure resilience in your platform and your infrastructure, that even though a data center went down or you lost power, the customer doesn't care. It'll be all over the news, right? Like, people will be like, Facebook is down, and it'll be the talk of the day, and it'll be breaking news everywhere on every channel. So I think those companies are kind of automating all those sorts of elements as well. So automation is a key part. The next part is lean, and that's about lean process, or small a agile. And this was really driven and motivated by the Toyota manufacturing methods. So it has history to it. And a lot of it is about, hey, if you don't need to have this process, why have it? If you don't need to have this control, why have it, right? So a lot of the clients that we work with, what they end up doing, if they experience a failure in production, their natural response, oh, let's add more step to the process, so next time we don't face this problem. And so if they experience 10 failures, now they're adding 10 steps to the process, which oftentimes is not the answer. Oftentimes you want to go back to the root cause and figure out how to eliminate that root cause altogether. So, sometimes it's not the intuitive answer. You need to dig a bit deeper. And that's where lean processes sort of come in to help you with that. Measurement. And I know Rajesh will talk about this later in much more detail, but for the measurement part, it's about, if you're not measuring anything, you don't know if you're doing well or not. And worse yet, even if you're doing poorly today, you don't know if you're trending in the right direction or in the wrong direction, which I would argue is a more important thing to measure as well. Because you want to know over time, are you progressing as an organization, or are you lagging? Because if you're lagging, somebody else is progressing, and that's a bigger concern for executives these days. So measurement becomes a key. And lastly, sharing. With the traditional silos of organizations, what happens is there's not just people silos and process silos, but also information silos. And people realize that knowledge is power. And what happens is, a lot of the time, the architecture team will be like, no. We are the only ones that should know this. Everybody else should not know it. And what we find that because of these information silos, you see a lot of misunderstandings. The architecture team designing something, application team building something else. And then if you come to the root cause, it's like, well, nobody socialized or shared the right best practices to begin with, but there's that implicit expectation, which is not good enough. And what it results in is more of that siloed behavior, that we talked about, tossing over the wall. No, you did it wrong. Go redesign it. Oh, okay, you redesign it. Go rebuild it, like I said you would, and so on. So we find that organizations that really excel are the ones that figured out how to democratize knowledge and information best across the board, regardless of function, right? And that goes for leadership teams as well. When decisions are made, providing rationale for people, so people are wholeheartedly in for why those changes are made. Otherwise, you see a clear dip in morale, and we measure this through surveys when we work with our clients as well. So this supposedly should have resulted in what? Happier, more productive people who collaborate more effectively. If you look at all these 5 elements combined, that should be the outcome, right? However, that's what most organizations have done, unfortunately. Most organizations did the easy part, which let's buy a bunch of software that automates things, and let's see how that goes. And not a lot of progress was made on the culture, lean process, the measurement, the sharing, to their detriment. So instead of people who are high performing, who are happy at work, who are able to deliver effectively against those business outcomes, that's what you got. And if you see the color coding is done there on purpose between the 5 pillars and what's in the statement, you get automating bad process without changing key behaviors, not understanding impact, nor aligning or socializing and having that alignment between the collaborators on any common vision. And with that, you can't really achieve anything, right? So you can't achieve the speed outcomes, the quality outcomes, the efficiency outcomes, the people morale outcomes, or security that we talked about. And we found organizations that did this and called it DevOps even went into a deeper hole than they initially had, just because they now had that rapid pace of change because of the automation. And their people were more demoralized because they were hit with these cultural issues, not understanding the impact of why they're working on something, not having a more streamlined process to work with. I'm not having understanding or sharing from how this ties to a strategy level, what we're trying to do in a company, etc. Even for the automation piece, by the way, I think a lot of people kind of automate. You don't have to automate everything, right? And that's why oftentimes when clients come and ask us hey, what should we automate? We're like, well, let's automate the things that will yield the most impact, because automation is an effort that your team is going to exert. And so oftentimes we conduct an exercise like a value stream map with them, right? Whereby we say, let's look at the process end to end to deliver one feature. Again, one feature. Let's look at the unit of work, which is one business feature. And let's see the highs and lows. Where are you spending the most time in the process, and deliberately automate that component? It's not just, oh, let's automate everything. That sometimes results in an element of waste, which I described earlier as one of the challenges, right? Because the focus has to go somewhere. And if it's going to the wrong elements, you're not necessarily making an impact on the outcomes that you want to drive. So you could do local optimization for the engineers in the room, and not global optimization if you automate the wrong thing. And if you don't have global optimization, what you end up with is zero impact to the bottom line, zero impact to your speed, zero impact to the quality. So sometimes people need to be deliberate, and organizations deliberate about what is it that they're automating and why. And that sometimes does not happen either. So you get overwhelmed, less productive people who are more siloed and extra protectionist. That's not really what you wanted, but that's what happens sometimes when people implement this stuff the wrong way. So you get this behavior called what I like to call over-industrialization of DevOps. Automation, buy. They go to 10 vendors, they buy 10 products, and they say, we're done, we're DevOps. And oftentimes, like I said, that ends up giving them the wrong kind of objectives, not the ones they were looking for. So today, many organizations are starting to realize that. People are getting smarter about this stuff, right? It's been around for a while. So for some of you that have just heard this term, it's actually been around for 10 years now. So like I said, over 10 years, since the late 2000s, 2007, 2008, around that period of time. So we're like 12, 13 years in now. And a lot of organizations have had a chance to try it, fail at it, do it the wrong way, do more automation, less culture, that sort of stuff. And now, there's a lot of refinement happening across the board. I know I talked a lot about cultural process, measurement, sharing elements, and not enough about the tech. And I know there's probably a lot of techies in attendance today. So I just want to touch a little bit on the tech as well, because the tech does have a lot of impact. I didn't mean to diminish its role in optimization of software delivery. It has a big role to play. And in fact, there is a massive realm of capabilities that is included under the umbrella of DevOps today. In fact, it's too broad, just because the people use the term in a liberally, like this, in different contexts. And vendors have figured out how to commercialize DevOps, and so they call everything DevOps too. So I think that, I'd like to share with you, maybe just so you have an idea about concretely what is it, or what I said here, what actual things does DevOps include from a technology hard capabilities perspective. What you see the line at the top here is basically the traditional software development lifecycle. Idea, develop, build, test, deploy. It's now in production, so go operate it. So first of all, there's a set of practices associated with DevOps. You might have heard of some of those words or acronyms thereof. For example, ideation becomes continuous planning, development becomes continuous integration, continuous testing, deployment, and monitoring. And these are not linear in that way. Otherwise, what's the point? So sometimes you end up with, you're doing an iteration within the phase. So you end up in what I like to call water scrum fall, which is sort of like you're doing agility within a phase, but you're not doing it globally. So it should actually be one big circle of enablement, but those are some of the practices that are included within it. So you might have heard acronyms instead of continuous integration, you might have heard of CI, or instead of continuous deployment, you might have heard of CD. But those are some of the practices that are out there for how to make those traditional software phases more lean, more iterative, and encompass some of the capabilities in a more advanced way related to automation that you're going to see here now. So there's a lot of boxes here. So I'll let you digest this for a second, but that's the realm of capabilities that companies oftentimes want to build in order to have a comprehensive set of tech tools, capabilities, practices, or really they're enablers is how we look at them. They're just enablers, they're means to an end, and the end is the outcomes that we talked about earlier. And those things include, just to pick a few, for example, we talk about source code management or artifact management. So how do you manage your assets as an organization? Are you smart about it? Because if you want to hold yourself to a high standard of security, then you probably want to really look after your data, source code, and binaries. Binaries is the ultimate artifact after you build software, right? So those are the things that, for example, those are the building blocks. And then after that, once you've figured out how to do your asset management properly, you want to manage the flow of work. So it becomes a bit more about, okay, so now that you manage your raw binaries, your raw material or your source code, your packaged material, which is your binaries, how do you manage the flow between them in an intelligent way? So that's when you get things like, how do you manage code quality? How do you conduct what's known as unit testing? And which is basically testing modular parts of the code, but you do a lot of that, big percentage of coverage. So basically you're testing in an incremental fashion as you go along versus doing it backwards. So was there a question there? Okay. Yeah, so there's elements as well related on the right-hand side to operations, right? So how do you do incident management in an intelligent way? So even though you've delivered a product or service now, it's live with your customers, how is your ability, in fact, to detect a problem before your customers even notice there's a problem? And what kind of predictive monitoring do you have in place to enable you to fix a problem before it even happens? I know that sounds like magic, but there's a lot of AI capabilities that are becoming commonplace in the market now for you to do analysis of data and know when your infrastructure is on the point, coming close to the point of collapse. So you're able to do something about it ahead of time. And there's taking that further, there's capabilities emerging in the market for how does a system heal itself when it knows that a problem is coming. And there's a whole host of capabilities available in cloud environments and platforms these days to enable you to do that kind of stuff. And if you do, that helps you go a long way to have a high standard of service to your customers. If you're watching Netflix these days and you're tired, you're on your couch and you're like, you've been planning to watch that show all night long, and you go on a couch and you click your favorite movie and it doesn't play because something is down in Netflix, you'd probably be angry. You're probably gonna go sign for Disney Plus now, right? Like, and so on. So I think companies really realize how important those technology capabilities are to them to give that a competitive edge. And it's serious stuff. It's millions of dollars for every incident, every single incident a company like Netflix or Facebook or Google has. And they realize that, and that's why they invest heavily in all those capabilities that you're seeing on the screen right now. Putting those capabilities together, you end up with a view like this, what we call, you probably heard of the concept of a pipeline, right? And I'm not talking about, plumbing they have in your house here, but, those capabilities have to fit within a flow in terms of how software delivery works. So different tools come into interaction with your assets at various points in time. So that's why the concept of pipeline, some companies call it opinionated pipeline, meaning we're going to do things in a certain way. And here's the triggering of capabilities and the orchestration at which point in time. And this is how we're going to decide to go from, you see those yellow milestones or checkpoints at which you get to make a decision based on facts and data. Should you go to production now or should you wait? And sometimes they make the system make those decisions. So you no longer need an operator to go and say, well, let me review that massive report and get back to you in a few hours. It's a train and it's moving, and the gate is going to close automatically if something is wrong with the package. It's just it knows when to stop and it knows when to open up to let the train go through. And that's how these pipelines really work, but for software, not just for, oil and gas pipelines or, waste or water pipelines, the plumbing that comes to our house. So that sensory is actually very relevant these days, and actuary in the world of software delivery. I'm going to hand it over to Rajesh now to walk us through some outcomes, metrics, measurements, and all that fun stuff.
Thanks, Fawzy. So we all understood how DevOps evolved and what are some of the key processes involved in an organization to become DevOps or to implement DevOps. But what exactly, when exactly would you know that you have nailed it? Like, is there a magic number? Once you have hit the target, you would say, okay, now we are DevOps expert? Or how would you make sure that your employees have reached that capability and they have, or if there is a certain distance that they still have to cover that will make them DevOps or mature? Because it's a spectrum, and it's a journey. So if we go to the next slide, you would see that it comes with time. It's a long haul journey. And many times when we go to our clients, we speak with them, and most of the time they would say, yeah, we are agile, we are DevOps. But once you work with them, once you analyze their efficiencies, the flow of the deliverables, you would understand that there are gaps that need to be filled, and there are areas where they can still improve. But when you are a new startup or when you are a new organization who are just implementing Agile and DevOps principles, you would need to make sure that you are able to measure your improvement or your effectiveness or your maturity. And on this slide, you would see some of the widely accepted metrics that organizations have relied on to understand where they stand as part of on their journey towards DevOps maturity. So looking on the left-hand side, these metrics are mainly looking at the throughput side of things. So as a software organization, how often you are deploying code over a certain unit of time, that's your deployment frequency. And if you are not a mature DevOps organization, you would have a lot of steps in delivering the code, and there will be so many manual processes. So obviously your deployment frequency will be very low. Similarly, the change lead time, like how much time it takes for a developer to do their check-in and for their feature to be deployed into production. And the longer this lead time is, the longer will be the full feedback loop. So if that developer is not able to move on from that particular feature or that particular product, if they want to move to a different project or they want to do something different, because first of all, the changes that they have done, they haven't been tested thoroughly, they haven't been deployed, and they haven't the developer has not received the feedback from the production. So they can't move on. So a mature DevOps organization will try to measure these metrics, which are catering to the throughput side of things, and try to reduce those to make sure that I won't say reduce both of those. Deployment frequency should be higher because that shows that you can easily deploy as much as possible, and lead time should be reduced so that you get the feedback as soon as possible. Moving on to the stability side of things. So what if you have improved your throughput, but what you are delivering is not working in the field? So you have to make sure that whatever is being delivered is high quality. So, and also your failure rate, when you are deploying something, it's not resulting into regressions. And that again will tie back to the change lead time also. If you are delivering something and it is breaking things in the field, and you are getting the feedback after a number of days, then first of all, the quality of your code is not good enough, and you are seeing a lot of failures despite releasing a lot of changes. But at the same time, then you have to work on fixing those issues. And so basically your change failure rate is also will impact your delivery cycles, and that is a sign of where you are on the DevOps maturity spectrum. Lastly, the mean time to recover. Like we mentioned that if you are implementing a lot of steps, like Fawzy also mentioned in the previous slide, that sometimes the organization, if they are hitting a problem, what they would do is they would put a step and to make sure that problem is not happening again, or instead of finding the root cause of the problem. So if something is going wrong and you are adding another step in the process, you are already in the wrong direction, moving in the wrong direction. You are increasing the time that it will take for problem to be resolved. So, and also adding more steps means you have more points of failures also. So what DevOps encourages people to do is to automate these things so that one, you can restore services when needed automatically or with very few manual steps involved. So these four metrics are widely accepted by the organizations, and the organization that we mostly deal with. We also, when we are embarking on the DevOps maturity or DevOps implementation in that organization, we continuously monitor these metrics, how the teams are doing and what changes within the organization we have to do across all those 5 factors, the CALMs fact that Fawzy mentioned. It's not always that you tweak only one factor and things will be resolved. You may have to look at all the 5 things and then also see how you are improving on those 4 widely accepted metrics to see where you are on your journey. Next slide, please. But what if you say, or your clients say, okay, we have been on this journey for a while, and we are at on the higher end of the DevOps maturity spectrum, but what's in it for me? Obviously, if you are delivering things with high quality to your customers will be super happy. But for your organization, what's it, or for you as an employee, what that means? So what we have found is that most of us, I'm sure, including the people on the bridge, you guys want to work on innovative products, innovative features. You don't want to stuck on the same project or working or supporting the same feature or software throughout for a long time. But that won't change unless you have the ability, or your organization have the ability to reallocate resources from existing projects and ask them to work on new projects or new products. But that can be done if you have reduced your release cycle or your change lead time, where at least you are able to, you're not spending a lot of time maintaining and supporting features and products that you've already delivered to the customers. If you are spending a lot of your time, your managers, your leaders, they won't allow you to move on to a new project, because first of all, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the customers are happy. And once you have achieved a high level of DevOps maturity, which takes time, like we said, and which has to be measured, and in terms of your effectiveness towards achieving DevOps maturity. And once you have done that, your employees itself, they will be very happy working on the projects or the products that your organization is working towards. So all in all, it's really good for your own benefit to make sure that you are spending time to develop your skills regarding the DevOps, and wherever, and you are measuring your effectiveness and progress on this journey. And next slide, please. So this is, I know we are connecting with you virtually, but this is where you can find us physically, when most probably once we are immune to COVID-19, that's the location. But meanwhile, you can always reach us we'll be more than happy to connect via LinkedIn, but you have our contact details on this slide. And I know Steve Jobs, but Fawzy, I think we have one more thing, which is on the next slide, that we would love to hear from you. And we are building our teams, not just DevOps, but also the cloud engineering practice. So feel free to look out for the opportunities on our website.
Thank you, Rajesh. That was great. I hope you internalize a few things from this presentation. Number one, that software delivery is complex. A lot of time when people look at traditional delivery, manufacturing, right, industrial revolution, they're like, oh, software is a breeze in comparison to that. But in reality, it has its own complexities and own challenges. That's number one. Number two, there is a science that's proven now to kind of deal with those complexities. There is a way to know where you have challenges and what challenges are worthwhile addressing. And once you have pointed the challenges or gaps or bottlenecks, what hammer to use, you're not using the same hammer for every problem. And I hope we talked to you about some of the tools today that are available, some that are technology-based and others that are a bit more people, process oriented kind of in nature. And to Rajesh and I, this kind of stuff is really exciting, because we truly look at it as problem solving, as optimizing for an engineering problem. And that's sort of like every day for us in terms of kind of our day-to-day with clients, and it's always related to the business outcomes, which has a big impact on end customers, people. And so to some extent, or to a large extent rather, the impact on people is actually really, really massive, and sometimes is really underappreciated. So we hope that you understood and kind of learned that as well from today's presentation. I think we're going to pause here. I know Dr. Rifai, we probably when I leave an opportunity for some questions. I don't know if people left anything in Zoom or in the chat window. I haven't taken a look.
Fawzy, my name is Harish, and hey, so thanks.